My name is James Stapleton. I'm the Senior Strategic Advisor at CGIAR, the largest publicly funded research network in the world. And I'm here, I'm not going to go through everybody's names, maybe we can touch upon them when I ask them some questions. So I introduce them as we go along. It's suffice to say that a very able group of professionals, technicians, people in the finance world, people in the research world, people on the coalface working with producers. And we're going to have, I'm sure, a really exciting conversation. So I'd like to maybe stop and pause for a second. We'll set the scene. I want to ask Dr. Kagele Maso, who's the Director of the Environmental Health and Biodiversity Platform of CGIAR, to give us some opening remarks to set the scene. Dr. Kagele.
Thank you very much, James. And I would like to take this opportunity to first of all thank the organizers committee of this event to have created a room for this session, and mainly welcome you all, those here in person, but colleagues also who are following us online. The integrated implementation of the Rio Conventions is very, very critical to improve in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. And multifunctional landscapes can play a critical role because land is really the best integrator we can have for the Rio Conventions. But for today, I'm just here to really introduce James, who has introduced to me as our senior expert for partnership and advocacy to run the show. And I do believe you will enjoy the chat. And James, the floor is yours.
Thank you a lot, Kagel. And you know what, let's start off the conversation to see where people are, both online and in the audience. We have a Slido, if the Slido can come up. And then you see we have a question on the Slido. What's your level of understanding of the opportunities and challenges to finance the development of multifunctional landscapes and to deliver on the 3 Rio Conventions, climate, biodiversity, and desertification? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes on a scale of 1 to 5, where you think that your knowledge is low, 1, and when you think your knowledge is super high, 5. So let's have this. Look at what you think at the beginning of the conversation, and let's come back to that at the end of the conversation. So I'm going to give you, 30 seconds and see where we are as we see the answers coming in. Right, so we're in the middle. So let's see how far we can get that 3 to a 5 by the end of this conversation, or maybe at least to a 4. So let's get in a little bit of background to look at the challenges. We've got a short video for you that's going to look at the challenges and the opportunities around multifunctional landscapes, and then maybe we'll just dive into the conversation. So let's, if we can dim the lights as well and and start the video. Thank you.
Our pursuit of food security, economic growth, and social development has led to harmful land and water management practices like deforestation and industrial agriculture. A critical example is the ongoing crisis in the Sahel region of Africa, where desertification, climate change, and biodiversity loss converge. Declining grazing lands and biodiversity force farmers and pastoralists to abandon traditional practices, fueling food insecurity, economic hardship, and conflicts over land. The United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification estimates that 24 billion tons of fertile soil are lost annually. Globally, 1 million species face extinction within decades due to human activities, with climate change a key accelerator, according to the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. The Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change are known as the Rio Conventions They were established at the 1992 Earth Summit to address three interrelated environmental challenges: conserve biodiversity, promote sustainable use, and ensure the equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources. However, biodiversity loss continues due to habitat destruction, climate change, and overexploitation. The UN Convention to Combat Desertification focuses on combating desertification, land degradation, and drought in dry lands. Its goal is to achieve land degradation neutrality by restoring ecosystems and promoting sustainable land management. But growing pressure on land due to population growth, unsustainable practices, and climate change make this goal difficult to achieve. Funding gaps and weak governance further hinder progress. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change works to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations to prevent dangerous climate change and supports countries transitioning to low-carbon economies. Despite international progress, current commitments are insufficient to limit global warming to 1.5 centigrade degrees. Political resistance, economic costs, and social inequality continue to challenge the transition. Addressing these challenges in an integrated manner, such as through multifunctional landscapes, can help protect biodiversity, restore land, and mitigate climate change simultaneously. Agroforestry, for example, integrates trees into agricultural landscapes, enhancing biodiversity while supporting production. Wetland restoration restores critical ecosystems that act as natural water filtration systems and carbon sinks. Sustainable agriculture promotes long-term soil health and reduces chemical inputs through practices like crop rotation and organic farming. By preserving habitats and maintaining ecosystem functions, multifunctional landscapes create environments where humans and nature coexist. These landscapes offer a sustainable path toward environmental and socio-economic resilience. Joint delivery on the Rio Conventions is essential for the resilience of multifunctional landscapes. These efforts ensure environmental sustainability, ecosystem productivity, and economic opportunity while promoting social equity. Holistic solutions and impact indicators are critical for monitoring and sustaining multifunctional landscapes. Agriculture and food systems have already altered over 75% of the world's land, polluted 2/3 of our oceans, and damaged 85% of wetlands. Restoring land ecosystems and reducing environmental degradation could generate annual economic returns of $125 to $140 trillion, 50% more than the global GDP in 2021. To achieve these benefits, we must improve landscape planning, governance, and business opportunities, and strengthen policies and social equity. Evaluating performance through well-defined indicators will ensure actions are sustainable and foster cooperation. Policymakers, investors, and stakeholders must prioritize multifunctional landscapes as a pathway towards sustainability and resilience. By investing in these landscapes, we can address biodiversity loss, combat land degradation, and tackle climate change while supporting sustainable livelihoods. A commitment to multifunctional landscapes will accelerate progress towards a greener, more resilient, and equitable future for all.
Right. So it's a really interesting look at some of the challenges facing the world and what some of the overall targets are. So to kick off the conversation, I'd like to come to you, Dr. Yang. You're a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, specializing in natural resources and resilience. And what I'd like to ask you is, where does research come in contributing to the goals of the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Fund? And specifically, what sort of outcomes do you envisage from research before we move on to listen to some of the challenges and maybe some of the solutions? Thanks.
Thank you, James. So we face multiple crises, and like climate change, our progress, the pace of progress on biodiversity is not fast enough. So we need more ambitious plans and more effective implementations of those promised plans. Landscape is this suitable and manageable scale to achieve larger ambition for sustainable land, water, and food systems, balancing the needs of people and the planet. So the CGIAR new science program on multifunctional landscape envisions diverse, vibrant, and resilient, healthy landscapes that are holistically managed to support sustainable eco-agri-food systems, resilient livelihoods, and healthy diets while remaining within the planetary boundary. So this science program, we are going to work on 7 key areas of work. First, we will be working on solutions and innovations. In particular, we will be using agroecology, nature-positive, regenerative, nature-sensitive, and other complementary approaches to support the transition toward landscapes that are multifunctional landscapes that are more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. And second, we will be working on with landscape stakeholders on landscape planning and governance. Third, we will be working on market incentives, opportunities, as well as business models. We will be working with our partners to co-produce evidence that can inform enabling institutions and policies. And also we will be working on the 5th area of our work is so we will be working on assessment, performance assessment, and evidence generation, but also global engagement and learning that can ensure the evidence produced will be used by national, regional, global actors to help them to engage in policy discourses and agenda setting. It's important to mention our research on gender equality, social inclusion, and fairness will help us address the question of how to ensure that indigenous people and local communities, women, youth, and other socially excluded groups are able to participate and benefit from transformation and conservation.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Way. I'd like to maybe bring in Dr. Fernando Sandoval from the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, and maybe take it a little bit closer to home, just focus for a second on the Latin America situation. Dr. Dani, in Latin America, what sort of steps do you think could be, thinking about some of the solutions that Dr. Yang was talking about, what sorts of steps do you think could be prioritized with the private sector in interest in, and communities that require financing for land, range lands restoration? Excuse me.
No problem. I'm going to speak in Spanish. So, bueno, en el contexto latinoamericano y a diferencia de los contextos europeos y quizá ahora mucho del trabajo que se está adelantando en países de África, hay un contexto institucional muy fuerte en donde se traen marcos regulatorios, marcos legales, estrategias nacionales donde fomentan la inversión extranjera y la inversión privada específicamente para los programas de conservación de los diferentes paisajes multifuncionales, en especial de los pastizales. En ese sentido, creo que Latinoamérica tiene un fuerte desafío en fortalecer ese marco institucional, en promover reglas de juego claras a nivel nacional y a nivel territorial que vinculen a las diferentes comunidades, que hagan atractivo al sector financiero y a los privados para movilizar esos recursos. Y no solo movilizar recursos, sino también pensar en crear y adaptar soluciones desde el sector empresarial que promuevan esos programas focalizados en esas zonas donde se requiere la recuperación de esos ecosistemas de gran valor para las comunidades y específicamente pues, para la conservación ambiental.
So just to focus in on that, for you the most important lever, correct me if my Spanish is correct, it's the rules and it's the regulations and it's what gives certainty to business and incentives to business to be able to move forward. Is that would that be a good sort of summary?
Ok, sí. Hablaba como de fortalecer el marco institucional, como tener reglas de juego regulatorias y sobre todo poder proporcionar monitoreo constante para garantizar al sector privado que esas inversiones están focalizándose en esos proyectos que ellos vinculan con alto valor ambiental y alto valor de la conservación para este tipo de paisajes multifuncionales. En ese sentido, Latinoamérica también tiene un gran desafío en promover esos sistemas de monitoreo y trazabilidad que permitan monitorear día a día, paso a paso, digamos, estas inversiones y que hagan atractivos estos mercados para los privados, pero que a su vez también garantice que esas inversiones están bien focalizadas y bien usadas.
Thanks a lot, Danny. So maybe just turn to speaking of the private sector. A lot of the time when people speak about the farmers, they're not often thinking of the private sector. Magali, one second. Magali Delomière, no, from the Union of Producers in Quebec. Magali, if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about, you know, what farmers could do if they have sort of access to finance. What are the priorities? Where do you see that the farmers could really excel and deliver value?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. I'm gonna read my paper because I'm a French speaker and I want to respect the time, okay? So in Quebec, we've been working for more than 30 years for an integrated approach to the agro-environment. This has resulted in the creation of a network of adapted advisory services and what we call agro-clubs. Our 42,000 farmers and foresters in the province benefit from them. We also pushed for public policies in sustainable agriculture. We obtained a 10-year sustainable agricultural plan for the adoption of responsible and efficient agro-environmental practices with 5 objectives, including improving biodiversity, and 8 indicators and targets to achieve. There is funding for the recognition of the efforts of producers for the development of knowledge, its transfer and training. This also allowed the creation of the Quebec Sustainable Agriculture Research Network and the establishment of a concerted research program enabling the development of knowledge and interaction between researchers and users in order to accelerate the adoption of effective agro-environmental practices. I could say much more about project financing good practices and the work with the researchers, but I can just say that all what we have in Quebec is quite good, but the problem is that those programs and projects remain ad hoc, with amounts too small to generalize good practices and generate a real environmental shift.
Thank you very much. I think that's, we're hearing similar things. We're hearing about rules that need to create certainty. We have solutions. We're hearing about rules that need to create certainty, and we're talking about really good practices and successes. But again, certainty, predictability, access to finding, and having it a little bit more structural. I think that sort of allows us maybe to shift towards Juliana. Juliana, you've heard a lot, and you're representing an extremely important community when we talk about the preservation of biodiversity, when we talk about the use of biodiversity. So what I'd like to ask you is, I mean, what are the financing opportunities and challenges that you face to sustain your action, given your role in the biodiversity and ecosystem?
Olá, sou Juliana Quirichu, Guarani Buiá e coordenadora da Comissão Guarani Urupá, uma organização indígena autônoma formada pelo povo Guarani. O nosso povo é um dos maiores grupos indígenas do Brasil em população e guardiões dos biomas Mata Atlântica e Pampa. A Mata Atlântica é uma das florestas mais biodiversas do planeta, sendo a segunda maior floresta tropical do Brasil depois da Amazônica. E também é o que sofreu mais intensos processos de devastação desde a chegada dos colonizadores europeus nos nossos territórios, sendo hoje uma das mais ameaçadas do planeta, com apenas 12% de vegetação nativa conservadas acima de 3 hectares. A imensa parte dos financiamentos são destinados a países ricos em biodiversidade, sobretudo para apoiar na transição energética e aplicarem a energia limpa e renovável. No entanto, no oeste do Paraná, sul do Brasil, a construção da usina binacional hidrelétrica de Itaipu causou remoções forçadas, mortes e alagamentos parciais do nosso território e devastação ambiental de toda a região. No estado do Rio de Janeiro, a construção do complexo 3 usinas nucleares de Angra dos Reis segue causando diversos impactos diretos e indiretos para 5 terras indígenas Guarani na região. Por isso, os financiamentos destinados para a conservação da biodiversidade, assim como a implementação de energias limpas, devem considerar a nossa existência e o respeito à cultura dos povos que protegem as florestas do nosso planeta. O povo Guarani desempenha papel fundamental para a recuperação de mais de 200 espécies de sementes de milho, mais de 60 espécies de batata doces ancestrais e na reinserção de espécies de abelhas nativas sem ferrão, promovendo a recuperação de solos e rios na Mata Atlântica. Um grande exemplo é o que acontece na maior cidade da América Latina, onde as terras indígenas, Tenondé, Porã e Jaraguá, promovem um cinturão verde de proteção ambiental para a cidade de São Paulo, mantendo limpo o único rio da cidade. Dizemos, então, que precisamos de recursos para seguir nosso papel de guardiões dos biomas, mas também que o padrão bioecológico de ser biocultural e respeitar o nosso povo e cultura na implementação de projetos sustentáveis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've been hearing a lot about some of the challenges. We've also been hearing about some of the financing solutions. But now I want to turn attention to a second to Janelle. Dr. Janelle Sylvester. Janelle is also a senior scientist in the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the Centre International de Agricultura Tropical, working in the biodiversity area and particularly working on the area of ecosystem services. Janelle, what I'd like to talk to you about is talk about payments for ecosystem services. Would payment for ecosystem services make a difference in the financing of multifunctional landscapes and deliver on the 3 Rio Conventions? How can these payment systems mechanisms be leveraged to attract broader investment? And what innovative financing instruments could complement these mechanisms?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Seamus. Payments for ecosystem services, or PES, as I'll refer to them. So they can attract broader investment in multifunctional landscapes. They can do this by incentivizing sustainable practices that promote biodiversity conservation while supporting local economic growth. This approach attracts investments from both public and private sectors, leveraging blended finance to achieve scale. What's key with this is that PES can attract co-investment into sustainable development pathways. They can do this by helping to de-risk private investments by providing revenue from ecosystem services. They can attract private capital by providing returns based on ecosystem services outcomes. And they can leverage public sector finance for sustainable land use practices. And for this, what's important is policy support, such as by providing tax incentives. In Colombia, for example, there is a tax incentive program called Obras por Impuestos, which translates to works for taxes. That provides a promising avenue for leveraging private sector resources for biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. This policy allows companies to invest directly in local development projects in return for tax deductions. And while historically a lot of projects focus on local development, this mechanism can also be used strategically to contribute to biodiversity conservation and sustainable development outcomes in multifunctional landscapes. And in fact, this year, our team at the Alliance of Biodiversity in CIAT, in collaboration with Colombia's Ministry of the Environment, successfully registered a project under the Obras por Impuestos mechanism, making it one of the first projects included in the registry that was developed to support biodiversity conservation. So for these reasons, PES can, when integrated with sustainable land use planning, can support achieving the Rio Trio through investments in multifunctional landscapes. Great, yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Janelle. I think some common threads beginning to come through from a human rights perspective, from a public good perspective, the need for stable financing, the need for rules, the need to be able to leverage public goods, I think, is some of the things that maybe that are coming out of it. Peter Goodman, biodiversity. The senior agricultural economist and the biodiversity financing officer for the World Bank, or should I, otherwise known as the man with the money. Peter, maybe if you could talk to us for a moment. Excuse me, I just picked up the wrong. Yeah, if you could talk to us about, how can the World Bank help countries increase investment in multifunctional landscapes? Or maybe even before that, to say, why does the World Bank view investments in multifunctional landscapes as important? And then maybe how we can leverage them. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so why do we invest in multifunctional landscapes? Why is this an important approach? And I think that is basically because we recognize the interdependence of the ecosystems in the different across the landscape, in forest, agriculture, downstream ecosystems. So, we know that we can't just do agricultural projects in isolation. We need the forest ecosystems for the water availability for agriculture. We need to reduce pollution and sedimentation in the agricultural landscape, because otherwise it's affecting downstream fresh water and coastal ecosystems, which are important for regulating climate change, which is important for agriculture. And there are multiple other links between them, as you probably all know better than me. So we have to have this integrated approach, and it's challenging because it involves different groups of land users and it involves different government agencies. But it's critical that we have that. So that's the first thing. So how are we doing it? So that's a big question to answer in a couple of minutes. But I mean, there are, if you broadly summarize it, I can think of kind of three broad areas in which we're trying to bring finance to multifunctional landscapes. The first one is not actually through our own finance, but through engaging with clients to repurpose agricultural subsidies towards investments in these landscapes, so that we know that if you redirected 10% of the 650 billion in public support for agriculture, we could return 105 million hectares of agriculture to nature, we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40%, and we could increase agricultural output by 2.4 trillion. So this is really where actually the big money is. And so we're working with 40 countries to do that. The second area is actually through our own investments, the investments of the client governments that we work with, IDA and IBRD financing, and we have several trust funds to help those countries integrate that landscape approach into their investments. That's the FOLAW Trust Fund, which is GLF is one of the partners, the Pro-Green Trust Fund. FOLAW has a focus on commodities, Pro-Green has a focus on landscape approach, and there is another one called NBS Invest, which has a focus on NBS based solutions. So we use those trust funds to try and increase the focus of our investments in landscape approaches. And finally, which I'm out of time, but finally is actually just trying to leverage private sector finance through the Global Programme on Sustainability and the Sustainable Finance Programme, and trying to de-risk how the private sector provides green finance. So there's three kind of broad areas through which we are supporting this approach.
Thanks a lot, Peter. You know what I'd like to do? I see that I have a little bit more time than, I'm a little bit ahead on time, so I'd like just to have maybe one thought about what you think could be a next step, or what you think could be learning, or what you think was interesting from one of the other speakers. So maybe if I could start with you, Danny, and then just work my way along. It doesn't have to be sort of detailed, but something that's come out of the conversation, something that you'd like to add, something that you think you've heard from somebody else. Peter, and 30 seconds to.
Hola, ok. Bueno, solo para agregar, creo que todos estamos de acuerdo en que el financiamiento de los paisajes multifuncionales requiere compromiso de no solo el sector privado, sino también de los gobiernos, un marco institucional fuerte, reglas de juego claras, y en ese sentido países como los latinoamericanos tienen que esforzarse por fortalecer esas instituciones a nivel nacional y local para lograr atraer esos dineros, esos financiamientos del sector privado a esos programas locales y nacionales que requieren ese soporte financiero.
Yeah, so I would say, the research from CGIAR is really important in helping us understand the type of benefits coming out of these investments, and actually who in the landscape are the winners and the losers, who are the beneficiaries, because that's really important for the economists, because it helps us understand then who should pay for some of those investments. Where can we get the who's going to pay, basically. So understanding the details and the costs and benefits of those technologies are important.
Magali?
Well, for the farmers, I would say, and it's true for farmers all over the world, they really need to be technically and financially helped towards sustainable agriculture. Actually, they are kind of part of the problem, but also part of the solution, and we have to push them in that direction. It can be public policies, but it also can be like ecosystem services program. There are many ways to help them, but they need that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, following up on these comments, yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, if we want to scale up investments, it's very much about partnerships between governments and the private sector and civil society, or the whole society approach, and you know, strong policy frameworks that support not only these mechanisms, or like, for example, payments for ecosystem services, but the sustainable land use practices to go along with them. Yeah, and as well, innovative finance mechanisms, of course, are very key in all of this, such as impact in investing. But yeah, okay.
One closing remark.
Precisamos de recursos para continuar seguindo com o nosso papel de guardiões dos nossos biomas. E também a bioecologia deve virar biocultural para respeitar a nossa cultura, respeitar o nosso modo de vida, e assim que juntos a implementação de projetos sustentáveis seja de bem comum, de dois lados, assim como tem sido sempre.
Thank you, Juliana. Okay, so we have two more parts of this before we let you go. One is the slideshow. Can we have the slideshow back again to see if how we feel more or less comfortable about knowledge of financing of solutions? Okay, you're either humoring me or we've moved the dialogue forward. So I just want to invite Dr. Simox-Lisi Sibanda, the advisor for climate change with the Commonwealth Secretariat, just to give some small closing remarks. Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, James. It's been a wonderful afternoon hearing from the speakers. I think a number of things that I would like to say as part of my closing remarks. I think what we've realized from the session this afternoon is that multifunctional landscapes could generate multiple benefits for different stakeholders. In fact, I think we realize that these landscapes provide everything that we need for sustenance. And in a time of multiple crises, as we face in the world, I think it is important that all of us that are working and doing different things integrate our efforts. And I think that several of the speakers this afternoon did talk about how important it is to integrate, to work in partnerships wherever we are. I come from the Commonwealth and we're an intergovernmental organization, but it's important that those of you that are scholars and working with CGI are working with us to ensure that the evidence and the data that you generate can easily and very quickly go into the policy process and vis-a-vis. So I think that's the first lesson that we've picked this afternoon. I think secondly, it's to recognize that there are several opportunities that we have, and I think that from the World Bank, from PES, there are all these opportunities, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us that we begin to look at this and see how we can integrate our work into this. I want to particularly highlight the fact that this year, the 3 Rio Conventions are meeting. We're having NB subs being generated by countries. We've got NDC 3.0 coming through. And we've got land degradation neutrality targets being done for countries. And I think all of us that work in this, area need to take those opportunities and work with countries to make sure that the views that we've expressed here are integrated into the policy tools that our governments work on. I think there is opportunity as well to scale whatever we're doing, and I think the private sector would probably be the happiest when we talk about scaling up, because once we scale what we're doing, then we're able to generate the profits, we're able to generate greater benefits for different different stakeholders. The last point I want to say is something that I think CGI and a number of other organizations particularly interested in research would be able to help us. I think it's important that as we go forward, we have robust mechanisms of monitoring and evaluating what we're doing in these multifunctional landscapes, whether it's for SDGs, whether it's for benefits for people, whether it's for benefits for nature itself, for biodiversity, for land restoration. We need robust mechanisms so that the idea that multifunctional landscapes continue to be taken care of is based on good data, sound science, and the policies around it are informed by the results that we're learning as we undertake the different things that we are already doing. So very, very useful session, and would like to thank the speakers for all the ideas, and many of you that have been listening online and in this auditorium this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sibanda. So that just leaves it to me to thank you here and online on behalf of everybody here. I think it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.